Okay, let's try again. Okay, ready?
Okay, so yeah, you go that way and I'll go this way. Okay, go.
Okay. No, it didn't work on my
It worked on my
whatever.
side. Okay, wait,
On
so
my side.
yours is this way?
Yeah, okay, let's do my way. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, go.
Welcome to Spill the Chai, everybody. I'm Aliya Jasmine.
Sangita Patel. 1, 2, 3, go.
Ding!
That worked for me.
That was opposite for me.
I know, you look beautiful. You really look great today. It looks like the sun is shining for you in LA, which is great.
Yeah, what about you in Toronto? Is it sunny in Toronto?
It's sunny, and I'll be honest, I was laying down in the backyard in the pool, and I look like a disaster right now because I just woke up. I'm like, oh my God, I have a date with AJ.
You're
So
so
this
cute.
is
No,
my
you
date
look
look
great.
for you.
I love it. I have my like seeing glasses here too, so I can look like Sangita.
We look like we know what we're talking about. It's great.
Look, wait, let me do my Sangita here. Look. Is that better?
We are matching now. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. We look like we're 20.
Which is, we look like 20-year-old YouTubers, which is a great segue for this episode of Spill the Chai, guys. We are talking about ageism, and it's a really important topic for all women. And I think it's extremely interesting when you even take that a step further and look at the intersectionality between ageism and the South Asian community. So that's what we're talking about today. Get your chai ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, today is a big topic, and it's something that we've all faced for a while. I turned 4. I don't even know how old I am. I'm 41. I was born in 1979, January 2nd. And, I feel like as I'm getting older, I feel I am more confident. I think I'm doing much better now. I believe in myself. Like, these are the transitions I am having mentally, but it's not the same when you go into the work environment. You're treated differently as you're aging. And so that's some of the topics we're going to be talking about.
So this is a really interesting topic because everybody faces ageism to a certain extent, right? Like, our society values young people. I think I've seen my dad, as he's gotten older, face ageism. But when you bring in ideas of women and then the level of like race, all of a sudden you have this like unbelievable intersectionality of ageism. So do you feel, Sangita, like personally, do you feel like women after a certain age receive extra discrimination?
It's a really good question. I want to give you a study because women in age discrimination at work, there has been a study that was in place in 2015 by 3 economists who concluded the age discrimination in hiring is particularly bad for women. Which we realize that it's always been that case when we think about men and women. The researchers sent out fictional resumes in response to 40,000 jobs ads and found that the callbacks were much higher for younger groups, no matter what kind of job was being advertised. But older women got the fewest callbacks, which I'm not surprised, right?
No, I'm not surprised, but I think it's interesting to hear that there's data to back it up. Like, we all feel it, but it's interesting that like these studies are showing that, yes, this like really happens.
Okay, so one of the things when I started in media, I had a child and I went for my interview and I did not mention that I had a child. It came out after I was hired and they say, why didn't you mention that you had a child? I go, I don't think that's important. Why does that matter? They're like, so that conversation directed towards how old are you? You're a very young mom. I'm glad you had your child younger. And so it's interesting, even those aspects, right? Women who are having babies, do we hire a woman because she's going to have mat leave? It's all of that too. And I think there's discrimination around that as well. But I didn't say anything because not only will they judge me because I have a kid, maybe not give me the job, but also the fact that I was a young mom too. And I thought that was going to be an issue too. Why did you have a baby at a young age? I wasn't that young. I was 27. But even that is a discussion about age as well.
Yeah, like I agree with you so much. And I don't want to veer off too far off this point before we keep going, because I think like the kid thing is a really big deal. Obviously, myself in my late 30s, not having a child has also been an issue. And I think that's really interesting is like, and keeping with your example of being in media, but like you wouldn't believe the amount of times I've gone in and successfully auditioned and had amazing meetings. I've been up for really big jobs. And what it comes down to in the end is, oh, but you're in your late 30s and you don't have children.
Oh,
so,
right.
Like, will our audience really be able to relate to you? What does it say? And like a man, that just does not factor in to a man being able to do his job on television, or a man being able to do his job, period, is whether or not they have children by a certain age. It just does, unless, the one maybe job that might be an exception to this rule is like being president of the United States. It's like, looks good if you're married and you have kids. But besides
Yeah.
that, I mean, I think that it's a really interesting conversation. So, and
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger, I was up
Mhm.
for a really big job. I won't say the name of the show, but it was a very big national talk show here in the US. And they flew me down. I was living in Toronto at the time, and they flew me down to New York. And I had all these interviews and all this. They put me up for a whole week. I went through all these chemistry tests. It would have been the job. I mean, it still is the job of my dreams. Like it was a really great job. But I think I was 20, probably 27, 28. I think.
Mm.
And at that time, they told me that I was too young, even though I had more experience than the person who ended up getting this job.
Right.
I was too young. And even though I carried myself older, because I wasn't married and because I didn't have kids, they felt that I seemed too young. Now I am older and I still am not married. I'm not engaged.
Right.
I don't have kids. And now I'm too old and I don't have kids. Like first I was too young and I didn't have kids and I wasn't married. And now I'm too old and I don't have. So
Right.
the one thing that I will say about, I think that through my experience in terms of relating to you, is I just feel like we can't win. I mean, it's really like we need to be so stereotypically what society kind of wants us to be. They want us to be a 28-year-old, married, 2 children, owning a house, like, with a very domestic pastime. Like if we are not that, then we are getting judged. And there's nothing wrong with being that if it happens to you naturally, but there's a whole who aren't.
There's so much judgment on women. Oh my God. Yeah, it's interesting because I think 30s are the best time of your life for women. I believe this is when you believe in yourself. You start feeling that confidence. You start understanding who you are. And the truth is really what it is that you have a job and you have money. Now you can do things you couldn't do when you were 20. But in the,
also the confidence too. I mean, I think in your 30s, you really reach a certain age where you're like, I like who I am, and I'm going to just live my life and enjoy my life and not worry so much about how I look in this mini skirt, like I think that it's a lot.
You feel the pressure, especially in this industry, and it's always been this way where they want women to look young. You want, and they say that you want to look your best, but really what they're trying to say is to look as young as possible and still have that experience on air. Yeah, all of us have felt it in some way or another. I've been told to dress a certain way. I've been told, maybe you should consider filler or Botox. I've been told, your hair has to be a certain way. You should dress age appropriate. You should celebrate your birthday. Maybe you should keep it a secret. Maybe you shouldn't tell people you're turning 40, talk about your kids. Maybe don't put so many pictures of your kids. Then your kids are getting older. I mean, my daughter's 13, my other daughter's 10. I could go on and on and on, but I've decided to say, no, this is who I am. This is my life. This is how I like to celebrate.
Really interesting. Sangita, you just tell something I don't even think you realize how interesting that is, because even when you are a mom, and we've seen that like women, influencer culture has really embraced this idea of like being a mom and being able to get older. And that is a industry where, that progression into like pregnancy and like there's an entire right. But it's interesting because when you do see moms who are, that's like their image, they have toddlers, right? And so it's interesting that you're saying like, oh, my kids are 13, and so my kids are too old. Like that's crazy, because like the ageism towards your children is like reflecting on you for not being like a mom of a toddler. That's so crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. My daughter's taller than I am. I'm like, that's okay. She's 13.
Yeah.
I'm a 13-year-old. There's something to celebrate about that. But I try to stay true to myself. I did celebrate my birthday. I let people know about it. I let people understand it. And I think it's just a mentality that's been there for so long. Like you said, when you went for your show, they thought you were too young, didn't have the experience. And I bet you if you go back now, I'm sure they'll hire you. Maybe you should call them right now and say, hey, listen, I got the experience now. I'm older.
No, let me be clear. I had the experience. I was qualified for that. I was the most qualified candidate for that job. Like
the life experience. What about life experience?
So I you know what? I was the same age as the other people who were up for that job. So it was nothing to do with life experience. I mean, if you're talking about life experience, like what better life experience than, being a foreign correspondent? Like I was in Haiti after the earthquake. I've been in like Utah, so it was just the idea of like, as a woman who is getting older, why are you not having kids? Why are you not married? And then once I became older, right? And like then it's a reverse ageism. Like I just feel like it's a no-win situation. I feel like we are always,
I know.
not only are we judged on our age, but we are judged on like who we represent as that
Yeah.
age, right? Like we're like a guy can be, for example, a talk show host. It doesn't matter if he's married or not. It doesn't matter if he has
Yeah.
kids or not. It doesn't matter if he's 30 or if he's 60. He will always be the face of like look at like Regis, like RIP Regis, one of my favorite on-air people of all time. I mean, he was a household name. I grew up with him. I watched him. He was amazing. But then you look at him and like Kelly Ripa was so much younger. Right? And isn't that interesting? Like, but could you ever put Kelly Ripa at 75 years old with a 20-year-old man? I mean, would they ever make that decision?
It's never been done. Yeah, no, you make a really good point too. And we were talking, also actors and actresses and the age difference as well. Females are judged right away to transition to being this beautiful, sexy leading actress to becoming either a mother or an aunt or a grandmother at the age of 40. Like we talk about Bollywood movies, for example, who was this incredible actress who passed away 2 years ago. She was 52 when she made the movie called Mom. And then you look at Shah Rukh Khan, who's 54, and he's the leading man who's acting with his love interest, who's always most times are 20 years younger than him. Like the last movie he did was Zero in 2018, and the actress was 35 and he's 54. So, it is, some people say men look more handsome as they grow older. And I think this whole idea of ageism where women are told to look younger has been implemented into us. I try to, put creams on and, hey, it's going to tighten my face or, whatever it is. But I still believe in aging gracefully. But I do things that are going to say that it's going to make my skin look invigorating. It's going to make it look younger. I do. And I think that's partly because of the pressure both of us feel, and a lot of people feel in the industry. So, yeah. And then you get worried when you get older into your 40s, you're like, will I get to do a job like this? I don't know. There's a younger person that's knocking on the door.
Like historically, this is not a new thing, right? I mean, like this is,
No.
how many times have you been asked by your family, especially brown families, like, okay, but what are you going to do once you get older? Like, this career won't last you forever. And like what they're implying is that soon you're going to be too old looking to do your job, right? And that is crazy because they would never ask like Amitabh Bachchan is still Amitabh Bachchan, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true.
It's like, it's just so frustrating. But I mean, historically, I don't think it's a secret that especially female actors have found it harder to book jobs as they get older. I think this is really interesting too. I don't know if you've ever read this book. I have not yet, but it's called The 100-Year Life, the living and work in an age of longevity. Have you heard of this? So a lot of people talk about this book. It's by Linda Grattan. And she basically says in her book that ageism at work, this is generally for like people of all industries, begin at age 40 for women. So that's pretty young. I mean,
that is young. I mean, the 40s, the new 30s, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, also I think when you're between 20 to like 26, 27, like you're just learning your field. And that's to say if you're still working in the same field this whole time, right? Like a lot of people change directions in their 30s or whatever. But like I do think that like your 20s are really when you do work over time and you are proving yourself. And like 30s is when you're really building and you're becoming who you are. And then all of a sudden at 40 you start getting judged by your age. It's just crazy to me.
I know. And it's also about praise, right? We talk about at a young age, if you're older for your age, more mature for your age, you get praise for that. Or you're doing a great job. You're becoming an adult at a young age. And then when you're older, there's less praise. I don't know if that affects you, but like, sometimes it'd be nice to get a little tap on the back and go, hey, you're doing this at 40. Oh, not even 40. The fact that you've achieved this, whatever age, it'd be nice to get that little, hey, good job kind of thing.
When you're like 25 and you do something great because you're good at your job, people are like, oh my God, you're doing so well for what we thought. Like you basically exceeded expectations. It's like, oh, we didn't think you could do that, but oh my God, we're recognizing you for how much you could do. And then all of a sudden when you turn 40, you just become invisible. And that's like a
Yeah.
really interesting, I talked to my mom about this a lot because she kind of like, she went back to school and did her master's degree. Like as you know, I did my master's degree to like, I just graduated.
Yeah.
So I went back to school in my in my mid 30s and graduated in my late 30s with my master's degree. And everyone in my program, with the exception of a few people who are around my age, it was a mind for me
Yes.
to go back to school and be with all these like 20 something year olds. But
Yeah.
one of the things that got me through it was my mom. So she went back to school. I think she was in her 30s or 40s when she went back to school because she was a refugee. And finally, after sending us to school and saving up enough money and becoming stable, she got to a point where she could afford to go back to school. And it was the best thing that ever happened to her. She, a whole other, leg of her career, she got the career of her dreams. She's like, has a big job now and lots of responsibility and is really fulfilling her potential. But I talk to her all the time about the fact that, like, had she done that in her 20s, how different the respect would be for her by colleagues now, because now that she's in her, I think she's in her 60s. Sorry, Mom. I don't really know. I'm not really sure. I think in her late
That's okay. You don't need to know.
she, I think she feels like when she's at a table, even by other young women, people are kind of just brush her aside. Like, her opinions don't really matter as much. She's older. She's a woman. Like, she's from a different generation, but she, in her mind, it's like, this is the prime of her life. She's just went back to school, got all this. So I think it's fair to say that does not apply.
Yeah.
To you.
Yeah. I don't, how do you feel about aging? Are you okay with it? Or do you wish you were back in your early 30s or 20s? Do you feel like you're always competing against younger people? I don't know. It's an interesting question how I deeply feel about it, because I felt great turning 40, but at the same time I was like, holy shit, I'm 40.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I had two different responses. And I mean, I love life, but at the same time, I'm like, what's next? Right? Like this, I guess there's chapters in your life.
And do you feel like when you say like there's two different responses, like, do you feel like it was like your internal response? Like like, you said earlier, like, I feel the best I've ever felt. I feel, most confident. And so it's like your internal response of being in like the best place you've been in your life versus the external response of like this industry making you feel like you had a chance of progressing if you were younger. Like, is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're right. I think it's the pressure of knowing, holy shit, my career could come to an end because I'm 40. It doesn't matter how well I do. It's because I'm older. Right.
And do you lie
I
about
don't
your
know.
age then? Like, and that's why I think a lot of women do lie about their age. And I refuse to do that. I've always said that I'm going to be honest about this. And even though sometimes at work I've been told not to, and sometimes at work, like publicists have, you write like whatever they write for you and they send it out and it'll be like in her 30s or in her, just say how old. I don't
say it. Yeah.
But I agree with you. I do think it's an interesting double standard for sure, because I also,
and I think
I'm most confident and happy in my life that I've ever been. I love getting older. I mean, this is the thing. Like, if you're asking me without the stigma, I love getting older. I love who I am 100 times more today than I did when I was in my 20s. I'm so much more confident. I love my life better. Everything about it. I feel like I'm just becoming a more complete human as I get older. However, my anxiety level of how I'm being judged by others and by this industry is so, it makes me second guess my own confidence in myself. Just because of age. Just because I'm like, will I not be considered for that job anymore? Like, am I not even, like if a job at that network even comes up, will they think about me because I'm like over the age of 35?
Yeah, I'm like thinking, if I ever stopped from doing something because of my age, did I not apply for something or did not put my name forward because I felt I was too old? And I'm thinking back, like I'm sure I have before, but recently I can't. I don't know. It's a really good question,
I'm going
but
to ask you about this, and I don't know how much you can say or how much you don't. You can't, but I feel like it's a bit of the elephant in the room here because, Sankita, I think for so many of us who, I'm not that much younger than you. I'm just a couple years behind you, but I think one of the
mhm.
most incredible things for me, as both as a woman in her 30s and a South Asian woman, was watching you become the face of CoverGirl in your 40s.
Mm.
I think that is something you don't see very often. So did they know how old you were? Like, was that part of the decision, or did you trick them, or like what? Tell me
Yeah,
about it.
it's
What?
such a good question because yeah, like they came to me knowing who I was. Again, like you said, I put it out there how old I am. I put out there my world, my kids, and how long I've been married. I've been married for 17 years. But they are the one who said, "Let's announce this on your 40th birthday."
Amazing.
They decide, yeah. And so the industry, I think, is changing in terms of understanding what is beauty,
Yeah.
what is ageism, and what do we celebrate. And I think that's where CoverGirl landed. And it's amazing, it's impressive, and it just meant the world to me. And I'm like, are you sure I'm 40? Are you sure this is
Well,
where you
but
want to go?
it also meant the world to all of us, right? Like, and that's
Yeah.
like the thing. Like, I feel like a lot of companies understand that they need to change the face of their companies, like literally the face of their
Mhm.
companies, to represent the consumer. And whether that's with race, whether that's with age, I mean, all those things need to be more representative.
Yeah.
And they do the market research and they care about their end profit. Whereas in a lot of like the industries that we work for, whether you work for the government or you work for, a telemarketing company or you work in media, they don't have that direct insight.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
what you end up having is this workforce that judges women and judges you as you get older, regardless of your gender, but then judges you
Mhm.
even more as a woman, and then judges you even more as a woman of color. So I think that's really hard intersectionality.
And I'm exhausted just talking about this. Yeah, you think about everything that's held against you. And if you were a man, you don't feel as much pressure in this case. It's unfortunate. This is a big division, really, when it comes to representing who your ageism in terms of external, right? Like this is you're getting based on it. And I hear all the time when men get older, they're much more handsome. And that's why, you look at the George Clooney's of the world and yeah, they are more handsome, but women are beautiful too. And I don't understand why that statement is always out there. I think we need to celebrate that. I think we need to change what is beauty, what is, your definition of beauty. And I look back at Viola Davis, who I had a conversation with, and she talked about diversity, but she also talked about ageism, the fact that she wasn't getting roles that she should be getting because she was
Mhm.
older, but she was the right person for the role.
Yep.
But it's slowly changing. We're seeing a little bit of change in Hollywood, and when it comes to women taking on roles that are meant to be, like you can't. What was it? Who was it recently? Liv Judd was played a grandma. I can't remember who character it was, but she was too young to play a grandma. She was in her late 30s, but like she should not be playing a grandma. I have to find out who the actress is. But like that, come on. No, she's in
You
her
see
late
that
30s. Come on.
you see that in Indian cinema all the time. I mean, that is
All
like
the time.
all
All
the
the
time,
time.
right? Like someone who's 35 is
Yeah.
like a mother of like a 25-year-old. It's like it
Yeah.
just doesn't
Yeah.
like even mathematically make sense. Do you think like when we were talking about like diversity in the workforce, have you felt age discrimination from coworkers ever?
Hmm. You know what? There's every time we have a discussion about diversity or now ageism, there's always an underlining microaggression. Let's just use that word for now. That it's there and it. And some like we know when we were just asking that question, have you ever not gone for something because you felt you were too old for it, or you just, maybe they wouldn't even just yeah, there's been stories where or doing interviews with certain people where they would consider me to be too old to be able to understand their chat, understand their talk, right? Which is not right. It's when you do any interview, it should be non-biased, and you should be
Mhm.
able to talk to a 2-year-old, to someone who's 100-year-old, and tell their stories. So yes, I think there's always that undertone for sure.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
good
really
question.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder if like we talk about like aging and like it's like a two prong issue, right? Like I mean like it's like on one hand it's like we want to feel confident in getting older and we don't want to have the pressure of like botox or filler or
Yeah.
whatever, but at the same time we'll spend lots of money and um I guess in some ways it's taboo when women are trying to confront ageism to like resort to the needle, let's say. And at the same time, it's not taboo to like go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on like creams or makeup or other things so I think for me, like, I think that there's just, I try not to judge because I feel like there is so much pressure on women to like look young that if like you do it like feels empowering.
You do you. That's exactly it. Never judge someone. You don't know what their reasoning is. Let them be whatever makes you happy, do what makes you happy, and do not judge a person for what they're trying to do to keep themselves happy. The problem is when someone comes to you and tells you what to do.
Yeah.
That I have an issue with. If someone comes to me and says, you may want to fix those lines.
Yes, exactly.
No.
Like, it should be up to you. But I'm curious, like, do you think when it comes to aging that the beauty industry has been able to successfully like offset aging? I mean, there's a pressure not to age. So do you think that they have successfully offset aging?
I think there's a long way to go, but they're on the right track. Definitely. I think there's a lot to say that, you know, even with the shape of a woman now who's walking the runways now, it's changed. It's not a minus, can you say -0, -1 size? It's now all different types of sizes. With CoverGirl, we have Mae Musk, who's 74, who's who's a supermodel, and she's working consistently. Like, that gives me, she's my inspiration that you can still be you and beautiful at that age.
And the Dove campaign, like all those Dove campaigns.
Dove campaign. Like, so I think we're on the right journey, but the fact that you and I are talking right now about this, and the fact that you and I are saying we still feel the pressure to look young, it's still there, right? We have a long way to go. Maybe that's with the next generation. Maybe they won't feel the pressure to deal with it, but within us, I think it's still there for sure.
So, like, and I talked to my mom about this, and I said to her, like, I feel so much, because I just feel like, A, there's pressure to look young, and then B, then there's pressure added on you about like, okay, don't be too young, or like, don't be young and dumb, be young and smart, but don't be too smart, but don't come across like you don't care about family, but don't have too much of a family. But like, you know, like there's all these like, and I said that to my mom, and she was like, but what was the first thing you said? And I was like, well, age, like they want you to be younger. And she's like, yes. And you still have that on your side. She's like, look at me. Like, I don't even have that option. Like, I can't even get judged for the second, third, fourth, or fifth thing because they've already looked away just based on my age. And she's like, that's the problem as you get older, is that you are just not even seen. You become invisible as you get older in meetings, in boardroom tables. And like, that is so scary because there's so much value that comes with age. And like the stuff that I know now, I mean, it like what, there are issues, even issues I've reported on, you know, oil pipelines, earthquakes, race issues, like social justice issues that I reported on in my 20s. And those same issues, as I get older and with the experience I have, get better. I'm a much better reporter, a much better journalist than I am now. And I think anyone, regardless of your field, can say that as you get older. You just know, right? Your worldview changes. So the value that comes with age, I think, is being stripped from women. And because of the pressure of being young or of looking young. And so what you have to offer is being taken away from you at a boardroom table, just because of you know, the judgment of you being irrelevant because you're older. And I think that's like, I don't know what the option is. I don't know what the solution is for that. But
and that's probably the reason. And we go back to that conversation of why women want to look young too, right? It's perceived a certain way, and we got to change that. I mean, again, Mae Musk is an example for me. Like, I look at her and I'm like, I could be 74 and doing the same shit she's doing. And it's allowed. That's the word for me, is it's allowed. It's allowed. You're allowed to be that old and be successful and to be able to do what she's doing. So,
and don't you think like as women, regardless of our age, whether you're watching this and you're 25 or you're watching this and you're, you know, 38 or 41 or 50 or 60, I think what's really important is that we recognize, like, as women, we all know that we are trying, I think, as a gender, to be more supportive of each other, right? Like, we are trying. So I think a lot of women, the most part of women, want to have this like female empowerment. And part of that is making sure that your female empowerment also honors the intersectionality of ageism. So if you are at a boardroom table and you recognize that there is a woman maybe at that boardroom table in her 40s or in her 50s or in her 60s
Yeah.
who doesn't have a voice, and someone's asking you as like a 25-year-old what your opinion is, like take that power and share it, right? Like take that power and say like, well, Susan, like you've been in this industry for 10 years. Like, what's your view on this? I'm curious, you know, like, I think that kind of like helping other women up and recognizing that we as women need to also honor other women as they get older is really important. Because we're all
so true. So true. I agree with you. It's so true. And I think that's a very important factor, especially in this industry where you're visually being, it's so strong. You're on camera, people are seeing you, and you're getting judged for that. And there's certain channels or shows where they have done a really good job of celebrating older women, but it's only particular positions, right? You're never going to see a 70-year-old doing entertainment.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time I was doing an event. It was Oscar luncheon. And I looked at all the outlets and it was all men except myself and one other person. And they were all in their 50s, maybe older, even older than that, which blew my mind. You know, when we think about entertainment, we're like, oh, maybe it's supposed to be the younger people. But the fact that not one old woman was there. Well, I don't consider myself old, but I'm like,
you know,
I was the old woman in the room. Maybe I was the old woman in the room. But you know, it was all old men, and then myself and this other young woman. And so it's interesting that, like, I'm thinking as we're talking right now, all the experiences I've had, and that was one that really stuck out to me. And I go, this is insane. This is crazy. This was in the US, but like, I'm like, this is, you know, that's interesting. There's not one older woman that's representing.
It's also interesting that you just have this epiphany where you're like, oh my God, maybe I was the older woman in the room, and you're the older woman in your room at what, maybe 40? Like the fact that is even like, that's crazy. Like if that is the oldest women in the room and you were 40, like what does that say about like how our society values like women as they get older? It's crazy.
Right.
Crazy.
I was the older woman in the room. Oh shit! You know what I'm talking about? Where we had dinner? Remember where we had lunch? There in that pool area.
Oh yeah, at the Four Seasons or whatever. Yeah.
I'm depressed by this conversation.
I'm sorry.
But I was a damn good-looking old woman, all right? You should see my dress. You should see my hair. You should see my neck. Like I don't look like this.
Listen, I think it's hilarious that you just realized that you were the old woman in the room, but I also need to point out that like you are hotter than most 20-year-olds. Like you have a kick-ass body and you're gorgeous. So like that is like
yeah. So I think this conversation needs to go on for a while. So we want to hear your opinions on this and your experiences, and let us know what your thoughts are. I mean, this conversation goes on to the point where we were talking about Indian matchmaking last week or a few weeks ago. And we talked about, there was one person who was a single mom and that she wouldn't even take her on. It's also with older women. Yeah. Older women. Like, well, we can't match you. You're in your 40s or you're in your 20s or early 30s. Maybe it's going to be harder for you to find a man, but you would never say that to a man. Right. So like even that conversation, like you were saying, you're 38. I'm sure there's aunties coming up to you, go, how come you don't have kids yet? Like what are you doing? What are you doing with your life?
And this is the thing is like, I think for you guys watching this, we would love to hear your thoughts, not only about getting older and ageism as a woman, but also like, do you feel like you get less praise as you're getting older? You feel like you're recognized less? I mentioned earlier, like talking to my mom, like sometimes she feels like she's just like invisible in a room because she's getting older. That's really interesting for women. So we want to hear all about that. Comment below, share this video with other women that you think might need to hear it, and let us know what you think. We are also available now on top of being on YouTube. We are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So listen to if you're listening, what you're missing is Sangita's incredible hairstyle right now. So that in itself is a reason.
Should I give you an idea? Like here, this is how I did it. So my camera's down like this. And then I did this. Because I had a date with AJ. Because we're spilling the chai.
For all of you who are listening, I am copying Sangita's DIY hairstyle right now. And we look like twins.
Damn, look at us. Oh, AJ, you're going to laugh. Look at this.
Oh my God, of course you have tape on your glasses. Once an engineer, always an engineer. Cheers, guys. Support other women. And we will see you on the next episode of Spill the Chai. Support other women. Cheers.
Support other women.